marketers at OS, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. I'm joined by product managers Simon Smith, Rebecca Taylor, Dean Pawley, Nikki Southam, James Terry, and Egbe Manners, who will be presenting for you today. Just going to run through a couple of housekeeping notes. We've done a few of these webinars remotely now, so hopefully we won't have any problems today. But if you do experience any technical issues, please let me know through the chat function in the right-hand panel on the bottom of that panel. Also, you'll all be muted for the duration of the webinar so that we can record the session for those who aren't able to join us. So if you have any questions, please type it into the questions section, also found on the right-hand panel, and I'll run through as many questions as possible with the team after the presentation. But for now, I'll pass you over to Egbe, who will begin the webinar.
Thank you, Elioma. Welcome and good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us today. So the purpose of this presentation is for us, the segment PMs, to showcase the work that we've been conducting and delivering for the PSGA User Engagement Program. Next slide, please. So what I'll just go through quickly with you is give you an idea of what we'll be talking about today. So we'll be going through a quick introduction to the PSGA, and this is mainly for those who haven't seen or heard this information before. And some of it will be familiar to those that have been on previous webinars or have taken part in user engagement. Quick intro to the OS product team, talking a bit more about the user engagement process and share some stats with you. And then we'll go on to talk about the deliverables for April 2022. And the deliverables from April 2023, and then we'll kind of touch a bit more on the key changes and then round up with next steps and then questions afterwards. Next slide, please. So the public sector geospatial agreement, PSGA, builds on our world-leading location expertise to the public sector OS partners to support delivery of critical infrastructure and services right from blue lights to street lights. So this agreement builds on kind of offering the new, richer data to give people and organizations and customers like yourselves a deeper and richer picture of our built and natural environment. This also gives you new ways to access our data, to open up those ideas and opportunities for public sector and our partners and researchers alike. We'll also be given the new freedoms to share data, making it easier for third parties to share information and link data sets in their own products and services. So we are developing the PSGA data and services, working closely with the Geospatial Commission User Expert Panel, PSGA members like yourselves, and OS partners to make sure that they meet your needs. Next slide, please. So I guess a big question is kind of why are we changing? We removing those barriers to OS location data, which will enable that kind of innovation and better decision making for customers, both new and existing across all sectors. So we definitely want this data and products and services to meet your needs. And here are some of the things on screen that you've told us, and I'm not going to read through all of it, but just pick out a few. So we've heard that our data needs to be usable and out of the box and easy to use for analysis. Our data is available in multiple products, which we're fully aware of, and at times with limited cross-product references and links. And a big one is kind of they kind of release the different currencies. And I guess we kind of would need to talk about it. Kind of the COVID pandemic, which we are currently going through, has led to evolving user needs, kind of what they want out of the data and their requirements. So by April 2023, we will ensure that the data and services will evolve to meet this change in requirements. The data, making sure that the data is going to be optimized for the more analytical use cases, providing up-to-daily updates, easy to use directly in your application, so plug and play, making sure that the cross references and identifiers are included in the data sets. So if we take a step back, the way we kind of try to gather and capture some of those insights was looking at the individual market segments, which are kind of listed out on the screen, so I'm not going to read them out. And this was kind of led, all the market segments kind of been led by a team of market segment product managers like myself. And on the next slide, please, you could see a picture of all of them. So we have Simon, James, Igby, which is myself, Dean, and Jess. So Jess has now moved to a new role as customer lead, and Nikki Southam has joined the team and will take over the management of those segments. We also have Dean, who's moved to a new role as a strategic product manager, who's leading on the changes we're going to be talking about today, with Rebecca joining the team to lead on those segments as well. So a few of you might have been in discussion on workshops with Dean and Jess. So this is kind of to introduce you to the new members of the team and to just let you know that the conversations that you had with them doesn't end there. It would continue with Nikki, Rebecca, and the rest of us. So going to talk about a bit more about user engagement, the process, and share some later stats with you. So as we all know, the PSGA is the largest and most important program of work that we, OS, have ever committed to delivering for PSGA members, partners, and stakeholders. This ensures that we deliver the next generation of enhanced and enriched OS data and services to support you, our customers and partners. And the key to delivering this is user engagement. So it's vital that we understand those requirements now and for the future. This will enable us to kind of build stronger understanding of your use cases and ensuring that we are putting you, our customers, at the heart of this user engagement, helping us drive our product and service design decisions and proposition development. As part of this process, we are using industry leading collaborative user design for the data for the product development process, making sure that we're involving you and that we have solid evidence to back up the design decisions as such. And also using this approach, it kind of ensures that we are able to identify any future needs and trends to ensure that we have a successful, sustainable future together, making sure that kind of continues. So the diagram on screen at the moment shows how the user engagement has been broken down into defined stages, which you might have heard some of us talk about stages on stage gates. So I'll just go through some of them quite quickly. So you've got one there with the discovery, and this kind of has helped us identify the user needs through discussions, workshops, insights, webinars. And then you move on to concept development, which kind of we're working on the draft propositions based on those discovery insights that we gathered and looking at what the product offer is. And then we went on to evaluation. That's doing prototype, creating sample illustrative data to refine what those propositions are, and capture further insights to just ensure and test how they kind of meet customer requirements. And then we kind of go on to 4, which is a product specification, where we're looking at those data requirements and all the feedback and see how we can refine and specify what the product and data should look like. Which leads us on into 5, stage gate 5, which looks at creating that data set, sharing it with users to test and refine, and we're kind of looking at alpha and beta testing with users, customers like yourselves. And that kind of leads us nicely to launch, and that's when you look at the first release up until full launch. So it's kind of a longer process. You have the next stage, which is 7, and that's kind of evaluation, going through periodic review of all the data sets, the feedback, field survey research, conversations. And this diagram just kind of shows to you that it's a continuous process. It's not just a one one-off conversation or we stop at any point. It will have to kind of continue going through this and make sure that whatever it is that we're delivering would meet your needs. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this slide provides more insight into the work we've completed so far for stage 1, 2, and 3. As you can see, towards the development of the contract, we engaged with 65 organizations, and that's kind of across different sectors, private and public, and that generated about 1,800 asks, and that was fed into the PSGA to help to create and develop the PSGA contract. And then as of last year, summer last year, we had a number of one-to-one discussions, which we actually engaged with about 127 organizations, and it's about 209 PSG members and OS partners, and a few of these conversations were an average of 2 hours and trying to just delve into those detailed requirements and understanding those use cases. And then moving on to December 2020 into July, our main focus was running workshops because that was like a quicker way to kind of get those detailed feedback, ask those critical key questions and get some responses back and test a few ideas quite quickly. And across those workshops, we had 483 places booked, and that was kind of made up of about 319 PSG members and partners. So quite good numbers there. It's quite good to kind of see that customers that we engage with span across different market segments, both across public and private sector. And next slide, please. So the way we did this, as you know, normally, I guess would have kind of met customers like yourselves face to face, but due to COVID and our current remote working conditions, we've had to evolve our approach to a more digital one using a combination of Microsoft Teams, Housepace, Slido, Mural. But this kind of enabled us to engage with a wider audience, requiring less travel, which also has its benefits on the environment. But most importantly, it allowed us to create an all-inclusive space where all voices were allowed to be heard equally, either through verbal feedback or feedback anonymously via text by responding to some of those questions. Next slide, please. So as a result of that wider reach to customers, we've spoken to many PSG members and OS partners, and including Geospatial members, to ensure a breadth and depth of understanding of use cases and requirements throughout the user engagement and product development process. So what you can see on the screen right now, it doesn't show all the customers we spoke to, but definitely gives an indication of the breadth of central, local government customers, partners, and Geospatial members that we've engaged with. So next, I'm going to pass on to my colleague Dean, who's going to talk to you more about more new ways to access OS data.
Thanks, Egbe. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Dean Pawley. As Egbe said in her introduction, I've just taken on a new role at Ordnance Survey as a strategic product manager. So ultimately, what that means is I will be taking over the leadership of a lot of the deliverables we'll be talking to you about today. Those deliverables generally are divided up into two. So things that we're delivering in April 2022, and then things that we're delivering a little later in April 2023. So I'm going to talk to you in this webinar a little about April 2022, and then I'll hand you back to some of the segment product managers to talk to you about the user discovery we've been undertaking for that longer April 23 deliverables. So if we just take a look at April 2022 then, so there you go, thank you. So April 2022 is all about our existing data. So depending on how you count our products today, we essentially have about 70 of them, and therefore lots of data contained within them. So what April 2022 is all about is extracting that data and putting it into a new data structure and also into a really new interface, which I'll mention in a bit. all with the aim of giving much easier access to our data, but also a much more tailored experience. So instead of making you take specific products from us, you'll have a lot more functionality to pick and choose which elements of our data you use. And hopefully a lot of you on this call have already partaken in a lot of our user discovery around this. So we've been sharing across the summer some of those new data structures, some of those new designs, and also designs around that new interface. And what I sort of want to cover literally in the next 2 or 3 slides is the feedback you've already provided us and what we're doing about that, and how that's sort of shaping our development, looking towards the deliveries that we'll be making next April. So if we just skip on to the next slide. Thank you. So just wanted to share with you, Egbay obviously showed you the overall numbers, but I just wanted to show you the numbers of people we engage with specifically around these April deliverables, or April next year. So the user discovery was undertaken mainly in July, but about a 4 to 6 week period, so towards the end of June and just straying into August. But the numbers here are really, really good for a summer period user discovery. So I think the ones I would draw your attention to are the very top one. So really good to see a great number of different organizations contributing. So 68 there is absolutely great. The one in the middle as well. So 62 new respondents, attendees, customers like yourselves attended our feedback sessions. And what's great about that is the other segment PMs are going to talk to you about the discovery they've been doing. And they are equally really big numbers. So seeing that we're still recruiting more customers and more people that want to give us feedback is great. And it's something that we really want to encourage as we go forward. So some really great numbers. And what that really means is it gives myself and the teams back at OS a lot more confidence that what we're building and what we're aiming to deliver really is linked back to what you need and want us to deliver. So let's take a look then at some of the key highlights that came out from that user discovery. And I'll just talk to you around what we're doing about those to make sure it's really fit for purpose. So firstly, the new data structure that I've just mentioned, what that data structure is essentially made up of is themes, collections, and feature types. Again, hopefully a lot of you on this call would have heard us talk about those and seen them in the user discovery. But essentially just a new way of structuring our data to make it easier to discover and easier to access. But some of the user feedback we got was some of the terms and some of the things we are using as names are not necessarily the easiest to understand as plain English and for new people. So we're currently in the middle of undertaking a review of those names and just trying to make sure they are as plain English as possible. So that's some really, really good feedback there. Moving into the middle box, our recipe builder essentially is a name we're using for that new interface. So where you and partners can go and start taking bespoke orders of our data. Was received really, really well. So we had some great positive feedback about the wireframes. But one of the real key bits of information you were telling us was you could give us even better feedback if you had something to play with, if we could physically give you a test system. So it's not something we can do right now. The system doesn't actually exist, like we are still building it, but it is still great relevant feedback to us. And our plans are, as this calendar year evolves and as we move towards Christmas and into the new, or into the back half of this financial year, we absolutely want to get more test systems out to you, or more things that you can give us feedback on, to absolutely relate to that. And it's something we really want to do. And then lastly on this slide, we really are committed to making sure you're absolutely ready for these new features and new functionality. So we've just kicked off an internal project to just look at the best ways we can support you. So whether that's technical documentation, code snippets, more webinars like this, absolutely want to get your thoughts on the best ways and best things we can deliver for you. So if you have any ideas or want to share those with us, even in the chat box now, absolutely please do. But equally with account managers or in sessions that no doubt will take place later this year, then please feed them back there as well. So they're the first three things. Let's just take a look at my last slide, but equally important things that we heard in that discovery. So again, moving from left to right, the new product structures, product models, but ultimately, how are we reformatting the data that we have today? Really strong positive feedback, which is really great to see. A testament to the work that's been undertaken by some of the members on this call, but equally some members of staff back at OS who aren't on this call today. But it's great to get that feedback from yourselves to make sure we're on the right track. And what this means is we can go forward with a lot more confidence that what we're building and what we're developing absolutely will be something much better than we've ever offered you before when we get to April next year. The second box, doing a bit more work around what data formats we deliver. So currently we are on a trajectory that means we absolutely want to deliver GeoPackage to you. But some of the feedback we were hearing was around CSV might also be beneficial. So exploring that in a bit more detail. Again, the same points are true in terms of if you have any thoughts and you want to share those with us, please do. But we are exploring that because, like I say, it was a really key bit that came out in some of our discovery work. So looking into that further. And then the last two, the classification. So any of you that are quite familiar with our products will know we publish quite a lot of classification codes in our products. And in this new data structure, where we want to get to is if we ever do that, we want to give you a textual description of that classification code as well. So it's, again, something that's really strong and really one of the critical points that we were hearing from yourselves in these feedback sessions was that it's really useful to have them side by side, meaning you can choose which and when you use which. So that's absolutely something we're committed to, and we're looking at how we integrate those into as many models as we can. So we're doing that. And then lastly, just exploring the tailorable functionality. So I mentioned, obviously, we want to give you the ability to just take the data you need from us. So which attributes and which filters you might want to apply. So as you're ordering data from us and you just go, actually, I only want X, I don't want Y, how you want to interact with that and which attributes you want to filter is really, really important. So we explored that in some of the sessions and have a really good starter for 10. But what we want to do is evolve that again through this calendar year. And we're sort of leading with the principles that we will start small and not offer loads of things that gets confusing and might not necessarily deliver value. So we absolutely want to deliver the ones that absolutely will deliver value, and then we can build from there into the following development phases. So that was also a really, really good bit of feedback. So that's me. That's all I'm going to say today, but hopefully you can see how your feedback has really started to shape our designs for April 2022. So for all of you on the call, thank you very much for any of the feedback that you might have provided us up until this stage. I'm now going to hand over to James, who is going to start talking to you about April 2023 and all of the new sort of data that we'll be delivering there.
Thank you, Dean. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks again for joining us. So as Dean said, this next section focuses on the key findings and outcomes from the user engagement for the new richer data. So many of you will have been involved in conversations, workshops, webinars, and some online collaboration to discuss the new data enhancements that we're delivering. So first up is this timeline. So to make you aware that from April 2023, that's when we'll be delivering the new data enhancements, and that's really building on the stuff that Dean's just presented from April 2022. We're also delivering an archive service to provide easier and greater access to an archive of OS data, and that's to support a range of use cases that came out during the user engagement. And we're launching a new visualization service which will be consistent with the new richer data. So I'm just going to tell you, we're going to move now on to the 9 key data themes. So previously, when we've engaged with you back in Stage Gate 2, it was around the market segments that Egbe highlighted earlier. To support the design and delivery of the new richer data, we focused on these data themes, which has ensured we're able to obtain critical design decisions for our operational and customer facing colleagues, and that's to help us start building out the prototypes and sample data, getting us closer to launch. So first up is the buildings theme. So key findings from those interviews, workshops and the online content were that buildings are extremely important to many segments and with wide reaching and diverse use cases. So as a result of that, we will continue that ongoing engagement with a wide range of users across PSGA members and partners to ensure that we maximize value. And we'll continue building our understanding of the use cases and requirements, and that will include the test and refine phase or alpha beta testing, which kicks off in September this year. Some of the more valuable and most requested enhancements related to buildings were for the number of floors, building type, building use, building age and construction type. And in total, we're developing 16 building attributes and feature types. And that's including the improved currency, new descriptions, enhanced attribute and lifecycle metadata, which will be launching from April 22. But also I covered that in the buildings workshop that I ran in July, if any of you were in attendance there. We understood the significant value would be delivered by bringing together additional OS-rich content with third-party sources. So we recognise that to meet user needs, we'll need to collate and combine data from other authoritative sources. So we're investigating that at the moment. And then my final point on the slide here is that with an increasing focus on decarbonisation and achieving net zero, there was a strong requirement for understanding the presence of green roofs and solar panels for buildings. So we've added in some new enhancements to what was originally planned, and in addition to that, we're expanding the building type from residential only to include all buildings. So again, as a result of the feedback and sharing your insights, we've been able to expand on the data we're collating and we'll be able to publish. So next up is admin and statistical units. So there is a pretty well known and perceived and understood value of enhancements to PSGA members working across citizen services and health and social care for this type of data, and it does expand into other market segments. Use cases focus generally on analysis for decision and policy making, such as the management of how we respond to COVID locally, regionally and nationally, but also things like supporting levelling up policies such as the UK broadband rollout programme. So we've heard several examples of where having two sets of administrative and electoral boundaries causes confusion in the market. Some use large scale, some use boundary line. Therefore, OS is enhancing the accuracy of the administrative and electoral boundaries and will only publish one set of boundaries through this new data structure. We heard users want to access specific boundary types, so say electoral boundaries only, or a specific boundary, so a specific name boundary, and that it should align more with other boundary related data. So therefore we're restructuring that data into feature collections, which Dean mentioned. So that would be an example of that would be an administrative feature type. To make the data more accessible and easier to use, and we're going to align that better with Office of National Statistics data, and we are adding a new country feature type as well. Users also told us they don't like the existing representation of the current notional postcode boundaries in code point polygons, or the representation of the multiple postcodes to a building, otherwise known as vertical streets. So we're enhancing the representation of postcode boundaries, and we're creating a seamless GB coverage where polygon boundaries will not intersect buildings or the properties or the site land use sites in which they sit. And we're also improving the model for managing buildings with multiple postcodes. And then finally, by working closely with a range of PSGA members on a data set called Urban Extent Polygons, we were able to identify an opportunity to increase or deliver more value, particularly around improving decision making for policy setting, by enhancing these polygons, and rather than deriving them from a 50 meter by 50 meter grid, we're looking at and have started modeling deriving that data from a 25 meter grid, which gives a slightly more granular and more accurate output for decision making. That's me. I'll hand over to Nikki to talk about structures. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Good afternoon, everyone. I've recently taken over the role from Geospatial in the environment segment, so I am the new product manager in this space. I was previously working in the data hub space before this, so today I'm going to take you through a couple of themes. First off is structures. So looking to support the key use cases in the protection of life and environmental management and natural hazards user segments. So from our key findings and outcomes from the user engagement that we've had with you so far, we found that the outlined PSGA deliverables and enhancements specifically for field boundaries and flood defences, which are a part of structures, wouldn't support the key use cases. So looking at field boundaries first, and whilst we were talking to you about this, we thought about the classification of field boundaries. We identified that the coverage that we were initially proposing was to only classify field boundaries adjacent to agricultural land, and we realised that that wasn't enough to support your use cases. So we've extended this coverage to include field boundaries which are adjacent to features such as forestry, heath and rough grassland. So this is to support the use cases for agricultural subsidy payments, but also it's important for national capital accounting and also to understand habitat movements, to help inform the biodiversity emergency that's been identified by the government. And then moving on to flood defences, additionally, we realised that what was described in the PSGA and our proposed implementation of this had limited value to you. So the desire was to have a more collaborative approach where we work with not just the national bodies, but also risk managers, for instance, local authorities that manage the flood defences, and with drainage authorities to produce a truly GB flood defence asset. Therefore, those flood defences have been removed from the new PSGA content offering. However, in parallel, we'll continue to support the existing public sector initiatives that are currently going on for the capture of the flood defence assets. In addition to what we learned through stage gates 1, 2 and 3, we're still listening and still asking the questions. So during our recent stage gate 4 design phase, we held additional user engagement using our house-based platform for the to assist with further defining field boundaries, height and width values. So thank you to everyone who was involved in that. It really does help to make us more informed implementation decisions. And now I'm going to take you on an overview of land cover. So in this theme, we showed that the outline PSGA deliverables will support your customer use cases, so specifically in rural land management for habitat modelling, design and administration of payment schemes and flood modelling, for instance. So therefore really important for those of you working in the environment management and natural hazards segment. Found obviously that of most interest was the land cover type and land cover percentage coverage. So a bit more on that, on what we found and the outcomes of those. So when we discussed during user engagement, we discussed those areas of change where firstly to reduce the size of multi-classified land cover features to create a more detailed land cover map. Also, we were looking to decrease OS's minimum capture sideline minimum size capture guidelines for land cover features. So specifically in rural and mountain and moorland areas, to align with the current urban region specification. And then on to the percentage coverage. So where those multi-classified features continue to exist, we will provide a percentage coverage attribute for each of those land cover classifications where they exist within a topographic area. And then also to align with recognised land cover schemes, for instance, UNIS, the European Union National Information System, which is the land cover scheme, which we know is really popular in Scotland. So we're continuing with user engagement to find where we can make all of you happy in England and Wales as well. So that will be future user engagement in the land cover theme. And then I'll take a quick overview of what we learnt in the water theme. So we recognise that the PSGA deliverables are mostly aligned to support the key use cases. So that includes modelling coastal erosion and flood scenarios. And most of the items that we were proposing to deliver in this space were in line with expectations, which is great news. And some of the key findings that we took away then was to source the water catchment information from the national bodies, which did differ from our initial expectations. And so listening, we had some really strong feedback on this, and so you really wanted information sourced from the national bodies rather than OS creating the data ourselves. And so now we're looking at how we can source this information from them. Additionally, then to provide the two levels of catchment information, so the water body catchments and the river basin district catchments, rather than the initial one that we were thinking of, to support key use cases in flood risk management and policy monitoring and reporting. And then lastly, sort of following on from your feedback, we're continuing to investigate options on improving the coverage and calculation of our river width attributes. So thanks for that. I'll now hand you over to Rebecca to talk through the findings from the land use theme.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. So land use data theme, the enhancements here were really identified as pretty high value by many of the PSGA members and OS partners as well that we spoke to during the engagement phases, specifically looking at sectors around kind of housing and planning, environmental management and natural hazards, as well as the protection of life sector as well. So our key findings and outcomes then, both land use sites and land use on our topographical features were kind of found to be needed to support and fulfill the really wide range of customer use cases that you guys helped us to identify. And there was really no clear preference coming out for one or the other there. So we will be providing land use information on both our land use sites as well as on topographical features. The classification schemes, when we're looking at land use, were kind of difficult to agree on a single one because there's so many schemes out there in existence, and the preference kind of varied depending on what sector or use case we were specifically looking at the time. So in order to kind of meet a wide range of use cases that we've spoken through, with you all, we will be giving kind of multiple classification schemes for land use sites. So our current proposal for that includes an OS classification, the NLUD classification, as well as using addressing classification schemes as well. And those will be taken forward into our test and refine phases, which Egbe mentioned at the start. As well as our proposed classifications that we put forward during the engagement phases, you've also shown us the importance of understanding the location of vacant and derelict land, specifically in the planning space. So we will look to include an additional classification for vacant and derelict land in the data where possible. And the final point I've got on the slide there is just that to call out, we did hear quite minimal support for the merging of adjacent sites that have the same land use. So in kind of light of that, we've heard you, and we will provide the land use sites at their most granular level to really provide that detail that you need. So adjacent sites of the same identified use will not be merged in the data. Okay, so that's all for me for land use. I'll hand over to Simon to look at the transport data theme.
Thank you, Rebecca. Outcomes. A lot's happened in the last 18 months, and so transport needs to have evolved significantly as well. Both pandemic and Brexit has influenced many users' needs and the policies for the transport sector. Policies often drive user needs, and to name a few influential ones for transport are active travel, levelling up, build back better, and decarbonisation. Transport touches so many market segments, helping us join citizen services, businesses, economic growth for the country. Therefore, multimodal transport networks are key to ensure accessibility for all. Through the interviews and workshops, we've discovered that the presence of paths, cycle lanes and bus lanes are not supporting all use cases for development in terms of management for the transport networks. Also, reporting of success against policy for both government and local authorities is becoming more important. So a better way of defining the networks is required. A growth area for transport is a greener, accessible network and to encourage more sustainable journeys for every day for all. So what are the outcomes that we're focused on in transport? Well, we want to define and build joined up multimodal networks to cover the whole of Great Britain. That includes pedestrians and vehicles, as well as eventually some other requirements that we know are coming around the corner. We also want to apply network start and end locations, again, for better management and development of transport networks. We also want to simplify some of the OS transport products by consolidating attribution and improving processing and analysing for those that want to use those data. We also want to improve analysis and routing by applying geometry to the network features and restrictions. And from the initial feedback that's being received is really positive. And also, again, I think it's mentioned before, this is not just a one-stop shop. We want to explore other options in return in terms of like providing new features around supporting accessibility. So we are looking at other sources of data so we can augment the networks. Oops. Up next is Egbe, and she will cover address.
Thank you, Simon. So as we all know, the enhancements within the address data theme, it's quite of high value to a lot of users, and it kind of supports that various use cases across all segments, but also a priority area specifically for protection of life. So as part of the user engagement, as you have heard us say, is kind of trying to validate those use cases, leading us to a strong understanding of prioritization and refinement of those enhancements. One of them includes the inclusion of classification code, as well as a textual description in the data model, just as my colleague Dean mentioned earlier. Another thing we're looking at is kind of prioritizing addresses within high-rise buildings, so 80 meters and above, for address floor level information. So this kind of looking at attribution of those features, and that's kind of been based on user engagement from what you've told us in terms of prioritization. What we'd like to kind of do going forward is engaging more. As we said, it's a continuous process with PSGA members like yourselves and OS partners to explore and prioritize the significance of detailed use classifications, which is kind of the improvement to the completeness of use classification attribution within the data. That's kind of looking at residential, commercial live addresses, such as homes, houses in multiple occupations, so HMOs, caravans, supermarkets, those sort of things. And another thing we would like to kind of prioritize and while engaging more with PSGA members and partners looking at those use cases is kind of improving the consistency and completeness of business names and kind of say, okay, how do we now prioritize what we put in the data, and that's kind of including standardizing the depiction of chain stores, for example, such as if you've got M&S, Marks and Spencers, and sometimes Marks and Sparks. It's trying to see how we can standardize, so you know when you're searching and filtering, it's the same, Marks and Spencers. Another thing we're kind of looking at is improving the address lifecycle, because what you've said is do lifecycle better, and this is opportunity to do that and improve on that. So the next one I'm going to talk to you about is geographical names. Next slide, please. Thank you. So geographical names, the main use cases are mainly with protection of life segment. So this provides orientation and identity to places of geographic significance, kind of looking at landforms and all of that. This will enable quick and accurate gazetteer searches and visualization. So what we've done from user engagement is make sure we include polygon representation of features in the geographical names theme. So when you're looking at settlements, it's not just giving a point of the settlements, but kind of looking at the polygon representation of that settlement. So just underneath the geographical names data themes, the main data deliverables are kind of names and numbers of road junctions, motorway marker posts, additional non-addressed features, and vernacular names. And it also includes the creation of an emergency services gazetteer, which is a comprehensive and maintained gazetteer of names and places. And this is integral and critical for locating incidents to save lives, save property, and to help tackle crime, essentially for the emergency services community. So as part, and you'd have heard us saying and my other colleagues saying about COVID, and as a result of COVID responses by this community, it's involved the way the emergency services interrogates data, specifically geospatial data. So as part of user engagement, what we did was kind of confirm how and if the proposed emergency services gazetteer would still meet the needs of the emergency services community. And if it doesn't, how could we kind of make it better? And as a result of that, we heard a request for additional requirements for access points to rail network and third-party IDs to be added to the ESG Emergency Services Network. Emergency Services Gazetteer. Another thing we heard was kind of a clear feedback for the unique persistent identifier in the Emergency Services Gazetteer to be the UPRN. So as an outcome of that, what we are looking to is investigating how we assign the UPRNs to all features in the ESG, Emergency Services Gazetteer, to enable that consistent referencing. So that's that investigation is currently on the way. There's also been that appetite, from what we've heard, for crowdsourced data, especially expertly crowdsourced data. As we know, the emergency services currently, when they're responding to incident taking calls, they do capture some of this information. So what we're looking at doing is developing a vernacular names tool in which experts crowdsources from emergency services can upload to this tool, and then we can maintain, and they can have a consistently maintained view of all the vernacular names across the country. And that rounds up the kind of talking about all the data themes. I'll pass on to my colleague, James, who would talk about some of the changes that we would have touched on earlier.
Thanks, Egbe. Yes, hello again. So this slide is really about showing you, so in addition to working on the detailed designs for the new data that we would have been speaking to many of you about in stage gate 1 and 2 and somewhat extent 3, we've identified further enhancements you told us you wanted to support your use cases, and these are those that have been added into the PSGA. I won't talk through all of these, really I'll just pick on a couple. I mentioned them before in the buildings data theme. So we recognised that we needed to extend or enhance the building type for buildings from just residential to all other non-residential addressable buildings to support the use cases that are across the top there. And we've added in the presence/capture of solar panels and green roofs. And that's primarily to support environmental management and housing and planning use cases. And then there's some across the other data themes as well. So if we move on to the next slide. So we're nearly at the end of the slides. So the next, so it's just really what's coming up next. If we can go on to the timeline, please. Thank you. So we've mentioned ongoing user engagement and the test and refine phase for the new richer data, or Stage Gate 5, which starts in September. And we are working on the planning for that now. And we'll be reaching out to PSGA members to get involved in that more detailed user testing around use cases and the data to help us finalise the designs. You'll be getting further updates about the PSGA programme at the PSGA Members Conference on the 3rd of November. And then, I mean, really from now, but from January, I should say, next year, we're readying members for the new ways to access the data. So that's mainly the new structure and new ways of accessing existing OS content. I did want to point out, because I don't think it's been said in the slides so far in the presentation so far, that we're not removing any of the existing products. So you'll still be able to access those. These are about new ways of accessing existing content, so giving you access to richer data and making it more easier to access it for you. So the user acceptance testing or expert user panel with the Geospatial Commission is happening in February next year. And then the final date there from April 2023 is about the ways to access new richer data. So that's the delivery of the 70 new enhancements from Ordnance Survey. Okay, and then the final slide. I think it's up for questions. Yeah, so this is the reminder of how you can get in touch with the products team specifically about PSGA and the PSGA program and the data. Is to email us at futuregeo@os.uk. I'd just like to say thank you very much, and at this point I'm going to hand back to Eliamar to field any questions.
Thank you very much, James.
Thank you.
And thank you very much to the whole team for the webinar today. We've had lots of great suggestions come through for Dean and the team, so we'll be able to take those away and answer them in a follow-up email that everyone should receive in the next couple of days or so. But some of the questions there that we can ask and answer now. So we've got a question here. One idea is that each feature in the national database has a single persistent ID, and that PID can be used to reference that ID. Will this be provided?
So I think I can try and answer this one, Eliomar. I think I get a bit lost when we reference a PID, but on the persistent identifier, that's probably what you mean, isn't it? Yep. So sorry, catching up with the acronym. So is it a plan of ours? Absolutely. So we really want to introduce an identifier that allows you to traverse those themes, collections and feature types that we've mentioned. So plans are in place for that, and equally what we name that we still need to work out. So yes, is our plan. The only thing I would caveat that with is we don't want to erode or be seen as trying to replace either the UPRN or the USRN. That's absolutely not our intention. So there is a high likelihood that we try and use those as our two identifiers as much as possible across the themes where they're applicable, address, transport, for example, and then probably have this additional ID that we promote on the other themes. So there's a bit of flexibility and a bit of design work to work out. But yeah, I think I saw that question was from Alex, and so absolutely, Alex, it's our intention to introduce something like that. And as we firm up those plans, we'll absolutely keep sharing with you.
Thank you very much, Dean. Another question here from Andrew. How far will the archive service go back, and what will it include?
It's probably another one for me, Eliomar. So I'm gonna give an almost a holding response to this one, Andrew, slightly. So the archive service is something that I think you probably would have seen mentioned on one of the slides James presented. So it's part of our April 23 type timeframe. So we know we want to start giving access to past versions of our data and that sort of historical access. That will, to your question, obviously need to be limited to a point, but that point isn't set yet. So something we still need to explore and firm up, because we are, like I say, 18 months or so away from that. So it's not something that's set in stone. So again, happy to talk requirements and that kind of thing, either with myself or any of this other segment PMs that you already have a dialogue with. So yeah, that one's still a TBC, but like I say, really happy to hear your thoughts on it.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Dean. We've actually got here a question for myself. Will this video and slides be available after the webinar? Yes, for all those who attended today, we'll be sending out the slides, the video of the webinar, and some of the follow-ups and suggestions that have been put forward as well. So all of that will be sent in the next couple of days or so to those who attended. And going back to a point that James made just at the end, you know, we're always open to discuss requirements as they develop and become more apparent. So please get in touch with the team on future@os.uk. So